Hi, everybody. You know, I did that show on mentors and people that really changed my life, transformational moments I've had and people I met. And I want to show you just a few of the books. Wildflowers and How to Grow Them. This is a book I got as a gift back in 1981. Yeah, 1981. And I thought, this is, if you can find this book, Wildflowers and How to Grow Them, Edwin Stefik, it's a wonderful book. It's filled with, I don't know, maybe 60 to 70 native species, woodland and prairie. And it's in tremendous personal detail about each plant, a description, a culture, how to care for them, and how to propagate them also. So I really recommend this book if you can find it. I found this at a bookstore in Madison for $7. It was just like a tremendous gift. And the other one I mentioned, Piet Oudolf. This is one of my favorites. It's an old book, and look it survived my fire. My house burned down, this book made it. You can see how charred it is, but it's designing with plants, plant design, and it's by Piet Oudolf and Noel Kingsbury. But it gives you a really good beginning and interpretation to Piet's thoughts about design. And Noel does a wonderful job of expressing himself and interpreting Piet very well in this book. So it's just a really good book to get you started in how plants live together, creating combinations. And I just got this book today, so I figured why not bring it with for the show. This is Piet Oudolf's new book, Piet Oudolf at Work. I just opened it today, this morning, and it's a wow book. It goes into a lot of his major projects, kind of discussing the patterns he's put together, how he overlaid the patterns for almost, I didn't even go through it, I just opened it earlier, but he shares with you all of the different patterns that he's created. So there's things, you can get tremendous ideas to start formulating your own signature when you design. There's nothing wrong with mimicking other people's patterns, because that's been done since we started creating things. We would mimic things we'd see, and then you combine the patterns to create your own signature. So I really recommend this book, and it's endless information about plants and plant combinations. Like I said, just came out, and it's Piet Oudolf at Work. Another good book I wanted to talk to you about that is it's The Sedges of Wisconsin by Andrew Hipp. It's a wonderful book. The illustrations are super, and it deals with the native sedges of Wisconsin. So, and it breaks it down into great detail. And it also provides some relationship plants that other sedges that live with those particular sedges. So I really recommend that book. And take time to understand it. Sometimes when you open it up, it might look too complex. It's not really that complex when you just start to focus on what is it you're looking for, whether it's height or foliage color. You'll find that, and his details are very good. And it's a very super book on sedges of Wisconsin. So take a look at it and see how it works for you. And the other thing I like to do, I did that last design deep dive with Carex, with sedges, putting the sedge community together. So there was quite a few questions, which I'm really excited about, and thank you for having comments and questions, because I think the sedges really are something we need to come to know in a better way. And I think a lot more people are getting interested in creating sedge communities because they're very durable and they can continuously be enhanced. So here's some of the questions. Carex morrowii, that's I think that's from Asia, from Japan or China. It's a nice sedge. It has beautiful foliage, wide foliage. There's, I think, some variegated ones. And actually, they're not hard to grow. It's a mounding plant. I have to say I don't use it that much. I have grown it, but the ones I got in, and this is going to seem silly, were variegated. And I personally don't know how to use variegated plants, so that's just me. I think in a lot of gardens with people that are comfortable with variegated plants, it's a beautiful sedge. I can't think of the name right now of the variegated one. I think one was called the Beetles, but I'm not sure about that. But it's not that difficult to grow in average, slightly moist soil. So I would give it a try. Uh, Carex shortiana is a good question about Carex and about the conditions it lives in. I grow it at I grow it a lot of places actually, and that sedge has a very forgiving nature. It grows in average to moist soil, and it actually does well in dry woods. Our woodland area dries out quite a bit, but the woods, our area is very moist in the spring, and then it gets very dry from mostly end of June on, and Carex shortiana has held up well. It hasn't really declined or gone backwards or deteriorated. And the only thing I can say it does, it gets looser. It becomes looser than it does in average to moist soil with a higher percentage of moisture through the summer. I think if I irrigated it in July, it would create a more upright vase-shaped look, but it just leans over more in drier conditions, but it hasn't declined or died. So I think a lot of the sedges have a forgiving nature, more so than specifically where you find them. And a lot of time it's due not as much to soil moisture as is to the competition they're living with too. And I'm still looking at that as I try more sedges at Northwind. There's a question about Carex living under established maple trees. So what we've used is Carex pennsylvanica and Carex albicans. And there's another one that's a European, is Carex flaca. Those three have done very well, but the key is you have to get them established. And we just drill them in. We're only using 2.5-inch pots. We're not putting gallons or 6-inch or 4.5-inch plants in. We create a little hole, we drill them in. We're mulched lightly with a leaf mulch, but the key is the watering. You can't water them once or twice. And actually, because they're small containers, it's about 2 years before they realize that living underneath the maple is their home. So we have to monitor the watering for a 2-year period. And some years it could be longer, depending on what you place them with. Here in Lake Geneva, we use Carex albicans under some maples, and they've done very well. But again, we have a watering system that comes on, not on certain times, it comes on based on need. And usually that would be early to mid-July based on rainfall amounts, or not at all. Some years it doesn't come on at all because we've got sufficient moisture. So one question too is a good one. Do I grow sedges from seed? I grow a lot of sedges from seed. In fact, the majority of them we grow from seed, and they can reseed freely. I'll give you an example of Carex brevior. Carex brevior seeds very easily. I use that in a woodland area at Northwind, and it's seeded everywhere. It's opportunistic in open soil, so when I use Carex brevior now, I don't put it in until the garden's 3 to 4 years old, and that way when there's more maturity and more competition, the brevior has less opportunity to seed everywhere. And the other thing Carex brevior does, it kind of leans open as it ages and looks like it's almost flat on the ground. When I put only 3 or 4 in, the plants that they're with support it, so it doesn't have that lay flat on the ground personality, because that's hard for people. I have to admit, it was uncomfortable for me to look at too, and that's why I took it out. And I still have seedlings coming up in the bed where I had planted them, but now the seedlings coming up are more intermingled with the plants that we have in that particular bed. And there's a lot of other sedges that I do from seed. Carex blanda, there's probably 15, 20, and there's a lot I've never grown yet that I'm sure are probably easy from seed that can be very dominant. The one that I don't use is fox sedge, Volupinoides, because that seeds freely everywhere. And I can't control that as well as I'd like to. And it seeds in the crown of other plants, and once it seeds in the crown of another perennial within the garden, I can't get it out. So it actually smothers and shades out the garden planting. So that's not to say it wouldn't be a good sedge to use maybe in a large area based on goals and objectives, but the fox sedge just seeds too freely for me to use in a garden situation. So you have to be thoughtful about that too when you put sedges in. Who are they going to seed with, and what's their reseeding capability? And that's why I wait sometimes till my lower sedges, albicans, pennsylvanica, Jamesi, till they're established to limit that opportunistic opportunity for the other sedges. One question was a sedge that would do well under a crabapple tree. It depends what you're looking for as far as performance. If you're looking for low mounding sedges, Carex pennsylvanica, Carex albicans, Carex jamesi, Carex flake, Carex humilis is very good because it's a kind of they're all good in dry soil, and that type of shade from a crabapple tree is more heavier shade, but yet filtered light gets through a crabapple. And they're all easy to grow, but again, I mentioned before, you have to continue to water and monitor the watering until they become adults, and that might be for 2 to 3 years. You can't just put them in, water them once or twice, and go bowling and have parties and ignore their health and well-being while they're still young. I had a question about sedges in Florida. I don't really know that much about the sedges of Florida, but I know the first place I would go, I'd look up native plant nurseries in Florida, and I have to guarantee, I'm sure they have sedges. So if you go to native plant nurseries in Florida, I'm sure you'll find Carex at the nurseries. They'd have it. There's a question about steep hillsides. And the sedge YouTube I did earlier, I showed you one that I planted where we couldn't stand up. We actually had to lay down and do the planting. And about 60% of that, maybe a little more, was Carex pennsylvanica. And then we also used Carex blanda. And they all did well. But I have to say, the owner did water. She had an irrigation system put in to keep the sedges at a high level of performance. But again, she wasn't dependent on that to run 3 times or 4 times a week. She just put that system on during the summer months and used it, and she used it very well as the plants were establishing based on need. And that area still looks good. That was in it's about 22 years old now on Lake Michigan. And it looks very good, but I think you have to be very conscientious of watering when you put the sedges in, and then aware of the watering needs based on the climate conditions that are taking place. If you have a drought summer, it wouldn't hurt to soak them real good starting in mid-July, early July. I had a good question and one of it could have been in the sedge one, but when I met Piet Oudolf, the one impression he really made on me was he said, "Roy, your patterns are too choppy." And that's choppy. And he was right. I had Ceslaria with salvia, but they were small. So the patterns were, by choppy, I meant here's a pattern here, pattern here, pattern here. It was hard to look at, actually, because it was just too much in a short distance. So he said, "Roy, think about stretching them out." So what that means by stretching them out, when Piet was trying to share with me, take the Ceslaria and the Salvia East Friesland, and take that pattern, if it's 5 feet wide or 4 feet wide, stretch it to 10 to 15 feet based on scale. So when you're looking at the patterns you create, you might have a 20-foot run, maybe do 15 feet and stretch out one group of 2 combinations, and your eye follows that group, and then you can end with maybe 4 feet or 3 feet of one group or a group of something mixed, and you can put some more mixed things behind that starting point up front. And you can stretch out patterns in the back too. You might take a grass like panicum mixed with Echinacea purpurea and pallida, blend those 3 together, and just run that all the way along from one end to another, or maybe going on an angle. So basically stretching out, just take a pattern and stretch it out and look at the site to make sure it's in scale with the site you're planting. Well, you know what? I think this will wrap up our season indoors, but I'm really looking forward to spring. We were out today cleaning gardens, cutting back, and I'm starting to sow seeds this week outside in the cold frames. We got seeds already germinating, which is cool, outside in cold frames, and the weather has been fluctuating as far as temperature. So I hope to see you all soon. We'll have some outdoor shows relating to activities we're doing. Plantings we'll be putting in. So I really appreciate your time, and if you have questions, comments, just keep them coming. And we hope that our future shows can be as informative as some of our past shows have been. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.